When one thinks of the Conservative Party, it's hard not to have even a flash of memory of one Sir Winston Churchill, the man who saved Europe from fascism and preserved British liberties. The aforementioned mental image of Sir Winston will inevitably include his donning and puffing on his favourite Romeo and Julieta cigar, accompanying bowler hat and throngs of adoring crowds. However, contemporary Conservative Party leadership has moved away from Sir Winston's trademark habits as Rishi Sunak last year announced plans to phase out all legal means of smoking over the next few years. Speaking in Canada alongside firebrand, freedom-loving ex-Australian Premier Tony Abbott, Boris Johnson lamented his successor's plan to ban cigars as being distinctly unconservative.
I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think, that are being done in the name of conservatism. I think they're absolutely nuts. We're banning cigars. And what is? I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see. Well, what is the point of banning? Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban.
Well, it's absolutely nuts. A very fine and pithy way of putting it. And on the topic of illustrious British cultural figures defending freedom of choice, the boss of 007's preferred motor brand, at least in the films, it's an Aston Martin in the films, in the books, as many gentlemen do, Bond preferred a Bentley. Anyway, he has said a hard doctor no to the state's attempt to coerce car makers into transitioning to electric vehicles, claiming they will only stop making petrol cars when they have absolutely no other choice. At the earliest, that'll be 2027. So is it time for big government to die another day? I'm joined now by my distinguished panel, GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and the journalist and Conservative peer, Paul Goodman. So, we should have a freedom to smoke cigars, and our children and our children's children and our children's children's children should have this right too.
I love Boris Johnson's way of having his cake and eating it, because there he is, spontaneously answering a question. And by the way, it's very seldom that he's rude in public about Rishi Sunak's government. It's not something he tends to do. Well, I was just sort of thinking back to the Johnson government, and in fact, if I remember rightly, there was a fracking ban, there was a ban on junk food advertising after 9 p.m, and of course, there was, the biggest state intervention of all, there was lockdown. So Boris's ability to project what is genuinely a part of him, this sort of freedom-loving bit, while occasionally do the opposite, is fabulous. But of course, he is right on the issue.
He's right on the issue, and this is a terrible distraction for the Conservatives. When you've got an election coming up, we're dealing with something that's fundamentally trivial and unenforceable.
Well, it's clearly something that the Prime Minister wants to do. I suppose it must be the case that very few people, I imagine, in his circle smoke. Perhaps that is fed into his interest in the policy in some way.
That's a fair point, isn't it? Probably not many of them smoke, and most of them did maths to 18, and those were his big conference announcements. But it doesn't really set the pulse racing of the voter, does it?
No, and I think he was looking for something at party conference to say, so he sort of grabbed on this policy. I think the last Prime Minister to smoke was David Cameron, who did it in secret.
Surreptitiously, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And Nick Clegg as well, his deputy. So they were both smokers. I think that Boris Johnson's argument seems to be the same one you would have for legalising crack cocaine. If it's all about freedom, it's a freedom of choice.
Not quite, because this policy is so bizarre that I've got lots of children, and my two eldest children will be able to carry on buying cigarettes for the rest of their life. Numbers 3 to 6 will not be able to. This is just weird, isn't it? When you get to 50 and your 51-year-old sister can buy you a packet of cigarettes, it's a bit stupid.
It is weird. I mean, if you're born on New Year's Eve, that you'll be able to smoke. If you're born on New Year's Day, you won't, and that seems to be ludicrous. So, while I'm in favour of the policy in general, I think that things like that, the anomalies that it'll create, need to be sorted out. So it may be, for instance, you extend the whole thing, not do it all in a rush, and you make it for anyone born after it gets royal assent.